is the ZócaloCast. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Well, actually, on this Sunday, it's just joining me because Char's not here today. She is off on another mission for Commander Ivanova. So it is just me holding down the fort. And I am so excited to be here this morning with all of you for this Ask Norm Anything live chat. This is a kind of format that I wanted to do for all of you because we're all fans of Babylon 5. We all love talking about Babylon 5, but there are times in our fandom where we just like to talk about other things. And as a huge fan of science fiction and fantasy, amidst all different types of genres, I like to talk about other things as well. So good morning, John. How are you? Thanks for joining us. Or again, thanks for joining me. I guess it's like a pattern. I always say thanks for joining us because Char and I are always doing these shows together. We've done, 40 or something odd shows together. And then on these odd occasions, I get a chance to kind of like hold down the fort, if you will. So the format for today is pretty much kind of like an wide open format. It's ask me anything from my fandom of Babylon 5 to my other fandoms to whatever you want to talk about. But there are a couple things Babylon 5 related that I definitely want to discuss when it comes to fandom and when it comes to how I fell in love with Babylon 5, perhaps how you fell in love with Babylon 5, and where we are with our fandoms today and how our fandoms affect our lives in various different ways. But before we do that, I want to make sure that I toast everybody. This is... I guess you could call it Mr. Garibaldi's special coffee, but it is coffee because it is early and I'm not quite up to Brivari speed just yet. So anyway, Valtu to everybody who's joined us and to everybody who's going to watch later. Delicious. And this is an Ask Norm Anything show. So if you want to know what's in the cup, it's essentially one of my favorites. It's Dunkin' Donuts original coffee K-Cup. Very simple, very simple. I'm a simple guy and I like simple things. Hi, Terry Lynn. Thank you for joining us. And this is interesting because I have some emails that I would like to read that have come in over the course of the week. And I'm really excited about these because one of the things that rarely happens, I guess, sometimes when you're a podcaster or whether you're a YouTuber is you rarely get a chance to actually interact on a personal level with your fans or with your listeners. And it's an interesting thing. It's a weird dynamic when you think about saying like fans, it's like that's, it's, I would like to approach that more of like we're all friends. We're all friends in the Babylon 5 universe. We all love the Babylon 5 universe. We probably have a lot of shared and common interests in the fandom universe. But it is nice to say that we have people that are fans that are listening to the show. Terry Jones, so nice to have you here finally and actually talk to you in real time. That's fantastic. Terry is a very, very active member of the ZócaloCast community. And if you don't know Terry, what he does for the Babylon 5 community in general is that he is the historian extraordinaire. So very much like the final evolution of human Vorlon in the last episode of season 4, where you're seeing all of the history of humankind kind of getting cataloged and saved before the sun goes supernova and takes out Earth. I guess, Terry, do you think that would be your final form when it comes to Babylon 5 history? Because you are the historian extraordinaire. So I wanted to get back to what I was talking about regarding friends and fans. And thank you, Terry, for giving me permission to read your email that you sent in last week because you had to leave the show early and you had a couple thoughts that you wanted to share. So Terry's email reads, "Hi, Norman and Charlene. Really loved your ZócaloCast on the 21st, last weekend. First time for me, but definitely not the last. I just discovered B5 this year. I am watching it for the third time now, intermixed with the movies and Crusade series. Thank you so much for having this avenue to talk about one of the most awesome series of the 20th century. Well, not including MASH, of course. Upon repeat views, one begins to realize how JMS interwove each character's story in and out of each season, sometimes leaving us hanging even in the closing scene. I wish Warner Brothers would give up the rights. I love to see Joe finish his stories. I had to leave early, but wanted to comment on what I heard later. Yes, David Sheridan, a big hole in the JMS telenovel. Remember what Londo gave Delenn and John at dinner. There's some real heart-wrenching drama around the future for his parents, and when the Drock comes out. Boy, did I get mad at Londo for that, even if he's not in control. Some friend. You both had some of my favorite episodes. After viewing my first viewing of B5, I started to read more of the actors' bios. I bet that you knew that Bruce married Melissa Gilbert in 1995. Watching Babylon 5 after learning of Mira Furlan's Delenn's history truly brought B5 into a new light for me, especially during Jakar's speech as he leaves the council meeting in episode The Long Twilight Struggle. Sorry for rattling on. The series is so great that I get carried away sometimes. Believe me, I completely know what you mean. Thanks for the info on what happened to Ivanova and Marcus. I got to find that piece from JMS and the books, but most of what I've seen are quite expensive. I'll keep looking, though. Some of my favorite scenes are around Delenn maybe flirting with John. I'm never quite sure if she's just being Brivari or realizes that she's flirting. It's like an accident on her part until John reacts. Yes, JMS does a lot of hinting, not just here, but for nearly every character and storyline. I've really come to appreciate his writing and genius. Take care, you too, Terry. Thank you, Terry, for that email. And perhaps our listeners that are joining us today would like to weigh in on some of the points that you have just made. And I'd like to read one last message. This wasn't an email, and this was a message. And I promised her that I would first wish her a happy birthday. So this is from Angela, and I promised you that I would say happy birthday on the show. So happy birthday, Angela. Thank you so much for sending me the message. And I wanted to read it on the air for you so that our listeners can weigh in on it. And she said, I just wanted to say thanks. I really do thank you and Char for keeping me centered and escape back into Babylon 5 world for an hour or more, and my favorite characters, Marcus and Susan. Thank you for answering a burning question about the terror reference in Learning Curve in a late delivery to Avalon in Series 3. By the way, so my question is, maybe if you can answer for me on the YouTube, how do you think Marcus Cole's Ranger would have gone out instead of giving his life force for Ivanova? Like maybe in a blaze of glory? In a White Star is how I see it. I just wondered what, if anything, your take was on how Marcus would have died. Thanks, Angela. Thanks. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Angela, for that. And again, I would like to see what the group may think about that question. But for me, starting off this whole Ask Norm Anything, I just want to address that because Angela is a very, very passionate member of the community, and she messages me quite often, and I wanted to make sure that I answer her question. So when it comes to Marcus, I think Marcus operates, in my opinion, Marcus operates under the impression or the motivation of this, and this is my opinion, of course, he operates under the motivation of guilt for his brother, guilt for not being able to live up to his own expectations of being this protector. He has this ideal of what the Rangers are, but I think that because of just who he is, I think that Marcus, in a way, he would do anything or go to any lengths or sacrifice what he needs to sacrifice in order to protect his friends and especially those he loves, like Susan. So whether it was giving up his life force for Ivanova or going out in a blaze of glory in a White Star to protect those he has sworn to protect, especially those he loved, Marcus would have gone out either way, either in a quiet moment as he did in Medbay or in a blaze of glory in a White Star, leading the charge that perhaps he thought he should have led in Ivanova's stead when they were going up against those shadow-enhanced Omega-class destroyers. So I think that either way that Marcus would have wanted to go out a hero and probably sacrifice himself and maybe even vindicate a part of his life or a part of his soul that was missing because he wasn't able to complete the work that his brother started and sacrificed himself for. I mean, Marcus, I think, is as great as and as much of a positive nature and a very upbeat personality that Marcus had. I think that there was something that was, yes, John, I think that you're right. There's a guilt that was lingering inside Marcus for quite a while, and he wanted to be able to rectify that and resolve that in some way. And I think that with Ivanova, he was able to do that. So I'm going to scroll back to the live chat comments here, and because this is the Ask Norm Anything, so I wanted to make sure that I was answering what you have been asking. So John, your first question was, okay, I have a question I've been thinking of. I wonder how it was for people who watched Babylon 5 overseas. Not everyone has the same channels and time chains. Also, how did everyone record the show? You know, for the long time, and we addressed this in a previous ZócaloCast, that one of the hardest things about trying to help promote Babylon 5 for a long while was the fact that it was kind of unstable up to a point around season 4 and season 5, especially when it lost syndication and had to scramble to find a different network, and that's when TNT kind of ran in and saved the day in a way. But even after that, even after the show kind of, it finished up its 5 years, and then it went to Crusade, and then Crusade kind of waned off. It was hard to find a way to share Babylon 5 with friends, because the only way that you were actually really able to do it was that if you were, diligent enough and pursued collecting it and recording it on VHS, back in the day, because recordable DVDs really weren't available. So the only way could really kind of record it and share it, even before they started selling laser discs and VHS tapes, studio level, actual real merchandise, was to record it on TV off your VHS, with or without commercials, however you wanted to record it, and then send those and share those with your friends. So I don't know how the overseas market handled that. Terry Jones might be able to answer that a little bit better, since he knows more of those kind of details. But for the longest time, though, until it started streaming, or actually until the DVD sets came out, it was really, really difficult to try and get people on board with Babylon 5, because unlike Star Trek at the time or other science fiction shows, WB didn't really promote Babylon 5 as a property, as in terms of kind of like their home video sales. And home video sales, especially when it came to like the VHS market, was kind of hit or miss when it came to the completion of what they were putting out. So when Babylon 5 came out on VHS, it wasn't entire sets, not entire VHS seasons like they do now. They were like a handful, like, either individual VHS tapes or like a triple pack. And that was really hard to get people involved, because as soon as they finished the triple pack, they're like, well, where does the story go from here? So, we're like, well, you just got to trust me on this one. Well, now you can share that with people online with streaming services, which is fantastic. Okay, so next question is, let's see, John says, how do you think the switch with the Orville from Fox to Hulu, do you think it will hurt the show? Good question. Now, since this is an Ask Norm Anything show, and we're talking about more things than Babylon 5, I'm a huge fan of the Orville, have been since episode 1, season 1. And one of the things that I believe has been a really great benefit to the Orville, and somehow even in a detriment in a way, kind of like in the same coin, is that the Orville has incredibly high production quality, incredibly great storytelling, and is filling a void in serialized science fiction storytelling or episodic science fiction storytelling that Star Trek used to be about. And since they are only 12, 13 episode seasons, you're only getting the Orville for a very short period of time when it comes to live network broadcast. Now, season 1, I think, took a lot of people by storm. It was a huge surprise and a huge sleeper hit in terms of what it did for the science fiction community. But then from December of, I believe, 2017, when it was the final episode of season 1, all the way to December of 2018 was a huge void when it came to how the fan community was trying to fill the time in between their support with the Orville and not losing interest in, well, what have you done for me lately? Because, excuse me, science fiction fans and fans in general are, at least in today's day and age, if you're not watching one thing, you're moving on to another thing, because you can switch binge watching to so many different platforms. You can switch to Amazon, you can switch to Netflix, you can switch to Hulu, you can switch to YouTube. So I don't think that we lost viewers from season 1 to season 2 from the Orville, because I think that there was a lot of kind of back channel support for the Orville when it came to fan appreciation, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. But then it got to a point where in season 2, you had this incredible season where it was really kind of getting to the to the strengths and to the quality that you saw in, like, say, Star Trek: The Next Generation, especially when you had the Kalon two-parter that emulated a lot of what Seth loved in Best of Both Worlds Part 1 and 2. That was fantastic, and it really rose to kind of like this really fantastic fever pitch where everyone started talking about the Orville again. And it had that fantastic season finale. And then it also had a great showing at San Diego Comic-Con, where I'm coming to John's point, where they kind of dropped the bomb on us and saying that now the Orville is going to go behind a paywall from being on network TV, on cable, on the Fox channel, for quote unquote free, i.e. not being part of a paywall, now to being part of the Hulu original series service, and now you're going behind a paywall. So now there's this kind of contention that has been kind of brewing with the Star Trek fans, saying like, oh, look, your show is behind a paywall too. You really don't have a leg to stand on when it comes to criticizing Discovery or the upcoming Picard series, because now the Orville is doing the exact same thing. I get that. John, I don't know how that's going to change the popularity of the show, or how the show's momentum has developed over the course of these last 2 seasons. Personally, I don't think that that's going to be a big issue, because there are a lot of people that are streaming Hulu, and they're already on that service. So that's just another part of that service. A lot of people online that I know, they kept saying that that's not a big deal because I have Hulu anyway, and I've been watching the Orville, albeit a day later. But that's kind of how the dynamic of watching your media is today. Not everyone's doing it as destination TV as we used to do it, where we would clear our schedules, make time, sit down, make dinner, have a bunch of friends over. And then as soon as that time slot hit, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, everyone got quiet, everyone paid attention, and there it was. There was your show. It was destination TV. I just don't think that that's the case anymore, which is why streaming doesn't really hurt shows like that. And the subscription service is already supporting the show, so you don't really have to worry about kind of like the advertising dollars supporting the show and making that network decision of whether or not they're going to continue supporting the show. So I think that the Orville will be okay. So Daniel Keller, and I will say Daniel Keller, but I know who you are. So hey, Norm, thoughts on the upcoming Dune movie? So I'm a huge Dune fan, always have been. I think Dune is one of the best science fiction novels of all time, Frank Herbert's Dune. And I'm a huge fan of the original movie, the Dino De Laurentiis, Raffaella De Laurentiis, and David Lynch directed, albeit the original, the non-director's cut was the Alan Smithy version. If you don't know the Alan Smithy insider kind of nod, Alan Smithy is what happens when a director doesn't want to use his real name to give himself credit on the picture that they've produced, because for some odd reason or another, the network got involved and created a version of the cut that the director didn't care for. But in the director's cut case of Dune, that is the David Lynch version of Dune. And I love that. I love that version because, yes, it does kind of go a little off the beaten path of the actual book, especially where the political machinations of the Spice Guild and the strategy of the House Harkonnen kind of trying to maneuver themselves behind the House Atreides in terms of their influence on the spice mining contracts on Arrakis. But I do love the look of that movie. I love the acting. I love the fact that that David Lynch brought in a lot of his familiar actors and actresses from Blue Velvet over to Dune, like Kyle MacLachlan and oh gosh, I can't remember all their names. Anyway, but Kyle MacLachlan in particular, who played Paul Atreides. So I think that Dune's going to be fantastic, and that's Denis Villeneuve, who has, he has had great success, and especially with the Blade Runner sequel, which looked fantastic. Wasn't my favorite story in the world, but I think it looked fantastic, and I think that his vision for Dune is going to be amazing. So I think that Dune's going to be okay. I think Dune's in really good hands. Terry, no, your email was not long-winded. I think it was fantastic, and thank you for sending that email in and supporting our channel. Let's see. Some comments here are interesting. Yes, certain channels don't exist overseas. John, you're right. But since it is now on Amazon and on Comet TV, these are now subscription-based channels and internet-based channels. So I think that particular issue for getting Babylon 5 out into the market is not really an issue anymore, especially being on Amazon Prime. Let's see. Terry says, in my opinion, Marcus balances out Ivanova's loss of heart. Well, Marcus really did. He did touch something in Ivanova's soul in a way where Ivanova least expected it, and I think that's why in the medbay scene where Ivanova and Stephen were talking about how, well, especially where Ivanova was talking about how she has guarded herself because she has resented, and it echoed in General Ivanova's sentiments. Like she echoed like how much she resented people leaving her. First it was her brother or her mother, and then it was Ganya at the Battle of the Line, then her father, and even in some cases, and it wasn't really it not so much leaving her in terms of leaving her dying or being killed in battle, but Sinclair was a huge part of Ivanova's life and lifestyle. And when he was relocated to Minbar, i.e. As ambassador to the Earth Alliance, and then eventually turning into Valen, Ivanova lost a lot of people that that were very important to her life. And then all of a sudden she finds Marcus, and Marcus, like she said, all he wanted was a smile or a kind word, and all she gave him was grief. And that was because she was trying to protect herself from getting hurt again. But realizing now it was too late, that all she really was doing was making sure that that she wouldn't in some way disappoint either him or herself if that relationship went any further. So there was a lot going on there, but all Marcus really wanted to do was to bring her just some small modicum of happiness during the course of the day, because she had so much on her plate. And he like Marcus was a tank. In MMO terms, or in multiplayer online games, what tanks do is tanks take all of the damage, all of the aggravation, all of the heat, so that everyone else can thrive and survive and go about their business. Well, that's what Marcus was. Marcus was a tank. He made sure that all of his friends, especially Ivanova, were able to live their lives, and he would bear that burden. He would suffer for them where he believed that they didn't need to suffer for themselves. That was Marcus's. That was his personality. That's what he wanted to do. Let's see here. My old John Bowersock says, a lot of people are really upset about the switch, and rightfully so, because there are people that haven't subscribed to Hulu, and now they have to subscribe to a new service. And here's something that I actually have challenged people to do when it comes to these quote unquote cord cutting measures that everyone is they're very excited to try, because some people are still doing regular cable, and yeah, I get that. But when it comes to subscription services pile up over the course of several. Before it was just Amazon, right? Before it was just Netflix. Netflix was the service. Netflix started their original series, their original programming, and that was the only thing you really needed to pay for. Also, Netflix they kept their price. I think it was like $7.99 or $9.99 for that service, whether or not you started waning off of subscribing to the CD or DVD service that originally was what Netflix was all about. For some people, they don't even remember that Netflix was a mail-in service, so that for DVDs that you couldn't get at your local Blockbuster or local video store when they were still around, Netflix provided and kind of filled the gap of that service where you could get the movies that you wanted to get, mail them in. They would send you back a SASE, a self-addressed stamped envelope, and then you would mail it back. That was great. Bing, bang, done. But then they said, okay, there's a little bit more of this kind of online business that's going on, the streaming service they started getting into. So they started with the licenses that they had with the networks that they were supporting and promoting with the DVD sales. They were able to get them in terms of a digital streaming service. So Netflix was the game. That was the only game in town. Everyone subscribed to Netflix. And then Netflix started saying, hey, you know what? We have all this, we have all this popularity. We have this subscribership. We have all these accounts. Let's offer them some original programming as well. And that really cemented their foothold in this whole streaming community. But then some of these other businesses are like, we want a little bit of that game. We want a little slice of that pie. So Amazon started getting into it. Hulu started getting into it. Well, Hulu first, I think. It was Netflix, Hulu, then Amazon. And now you're doing 3, 4, 5 different accounts with DC Universe, if you want to get your DC movies, Disney Plus that's coming up, which is going to be pretty much all-encompassing every single Disney property when it comes to either Disney animation, Marvel, Star Wars. I mean, they have a huge library, and their price is going to win that service in the price wars because they're keeping their price down really, really low. So with Hulu and Netflix, in order to compete, they have to either, one, increase their prices, which Netflix did, and to create more original programming, where now you're starting to see these lanes open up where you can only see Stranger Things on Netflix. You can only see original programming that Hulu offers on Hulu. You can only see original programming like now The Expanse on Amazon Prime. So start adding up all of your accounts and see if you're now really saving what you used to be able to save when you originally cut the cord from cable. Add up your $14.99s times 3 or times 4 or times 5, and you're at to a $60, $70 bill. Now that's where people are starting to really to dig their heels in and say like, hey, you know what? I don't think I really need that service anymore. I'm just going to go to where I can get 90% of my content. And I've even heard online people saying that, well, if I don't get a chance to see it, I don't get a chance to see it. CBS All Access, for example, has put the very first paywall up when it comes to watching Star Trek content. Now, I'm not talking about Star Trek content that you can see like in terms of syndication, like the original series Deep Space Nine, The Next Generation, and Voyager and Enterprise. Those are all in syndication at one point in time, probably still are. But with Discovery, with CBS Discovery, and going to John's question about the Picard series that's coming up, that's behind the CBS All Access paywall. Now, I tried that, and it was okay for me. It may be, and I know that it's great for other people, but I'm not sure how I feel about going forward with the Picard series. I think the Picard series is going to entertain people as it needs to entertain people. People are going to get out of Star Trek what they need to get out of Star Trek. And that comes to, usually in these Ask Norm type formats, I have this hugely cathartic moment because I think that a lot of people that are watching or will watch have a similar dynamic that they're going through in their fandom, whatever their fandom is. In my case, it's Star Trek. Star Trek for me is the fandom that really brought me into this entire science fiction fantasy genre game. The original series to me is hugely, profoundly influential. It has shaped my life in numerous different ways. But as I have grown up through Star Trek and with Star Trek to me also has a certain era that I love. And that era kind of feeds into the nostalgia of why I love Star Trek. And as these series progress into this new medium of CBS All Access and these streaming services, and I guess catering to a new audience in their look and in their feel and in their production and in their message, I'm not sure if I'm really that audience anymore. And that's okay. Not every single series and not every single property out there is going to speak to everybody all inclusively. I think that as these shows progress and as each series adds to the overall tapestry of that particular genre, of that particular property. Especially in Star Trek's case, you have, I don't know how many. You have the original series, the Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, Discovery, and now Picard series, and then you're going to have Lower Decks, and then one or two other properties, plus the movies, right? And plus all the fan films. There's a lot of Star Trek out there, a lot of Star Trek out there. So sometimes I feel like I have to pick and choose and find the Star Trek that's meaningful to me. And right now, that's kind of like the original series and the original series movies. I completely get why people love Picard. I love Patrick Stewart as Picard, but it will be interesting to see like where the showrunners take Picard. And are they going to bank on that? A lot of people that grew up with the Next Generation, and Next Generation, let's all be honest, Next Generation is by far the most popular of the Star Trek series. It had probably like the most successful syndicated run of any TV show in the history of syndicated TV shows. And when it comes down to it, as critically acclaimed and as much as I love Deep Space Nine, if you put every single captain's face like on a poster, 9 times out of 10 people will know either Picard first or Kirk second, and then be like, oh, those are Star Trek captains? Because Picard was universal. He was universally merchandised when Star Trek was at its merchandising, I guess it's merchandising zenith, when it was kind of like in the late 80s, early 90s. And rightfully so, because it had huge market saturation and huge replay and syndication. And it was a fantastic show. So, and it also had, at that time, it had the longest run of any Star Trek series up until that point, which was the 7 seasons, and then plus the subsequent, 3.5 movies: Generations, First Contact, Insurrection, and then Nemesis. So there was a lot of Picard out there, and a lot of Picard's story that was hugely influential for a lot of people. So when you see Picard come back, yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting to see. And I think that a lot of Picard fans and Next Generation fans are going to get a lot out of that. And there are so many different ways that you can add to this character's legacy. And you have Patrick Stewart. And Patrick Stewart is, by and large, one of the finest actors that anyone has ever seen in the genre, either science fiction, fantasy, or anything that he performs in. So there's a lot of positivity going on, a lot of pluses on the Picard side. We'll just get to see where the storytellers take him and how the writing holds up, and if it services the characters well. So, and I hope it does. So Terry says, didn't switches save B5 to continue into season 5? Well, yes, they did. But as we all know, JMS, he capped Babylon 5 into 5 seasons. So what we were hoping that we were going to get from the support with TNT was the continuation of the Babylon 5 lore in Crusade. And I think Terry Jones can probably answer this with more detail than I can. But from what I understand is that there was a lot of network, I don't want to say interference because I don't know exactly what they were doing, but there was a lot of network input with TNT at the time. TNT at that time was going through a lot of kind of network programming changes. They were trying to push towards a certain specific demographic, and that demographic were, I think it was like around the 18 to 20 something male market, because they promoted wrestling like no other network at the time. That was like the wrestling destination channel. And they wanted to add more influence into like all of their other programming, where it would promote building upon that demographic. And I think that Crusade in a way just didn't speak, or Babylon 5 in general just didn't speak to that demographic at the time. And then also it didn't help that they showed the series out of order. They didn't really promote it in terms of like, advertising on TV or in the trades. So it's unfortunate. That relationship just didn't really work out to where we needed Babylon 5 to continue into Crusade. So I think that I'm fairly correct about the history of that and how it fell out at the time. But here it is. It's like that was like in the late 1990s, early 2000s, where the internet wasn't as prevalent as in terms of like just being able to Google history at the time. So you might be able to find a little bit more detail on that. Terry Lynn says, I'm so fed up with CBS. My neighbor can't watch it because they're set. Oh, that's right. I think in some markets, it's DirecTV I think it was DirecTV or Dish that dropped the CBS station locally or nationally. So yeah, I've heard a lot of complaints about that, and not just CBS in like the network, but I know that there's a lot of going on with the football contracts, because if you're a football fan, you're not getting CBS in your market, which is like half of the coverage of the National Football League. So I hope you're able to work your way around that. Terry Jones says Marcus would have featured in a spin-off show that would have eventually become Crusade. Sorry, had to duck out for food. Well, you have to eat. I won't blame you for eating. That's okay. That would have been amazing. And definitely Marcus would have been a great spin-off character to have led that, led Crusade. And that would have been amazing. And that would have been a great tie-in back and forth. And maybe that's where his relationship, with Ivanova would have been able to blossom if, in fact, Claudia would have come back for that fifth season. Terry Jones says, Marcus, I'm assuming that you're talking about Marcus. Guilt over his brother's death. Terval points that out. Yes. Yeah. Sec Terval, he basically said that, Marcus is working under the impression that he wasn't there to be able to, he didn't believe in what his brother was involving himself with these Rangers. He didn't believe in the cause. He didn't believe that you should put yourself out there for strangers and take up arms where you weren't, you didn't have concern, or you didn't have concern for the people that you were trying to protect. And I think that he finally understood that in the end, especially where his friends were concerned. John Barsax, cough, cough, dare I say Firefly cursing Fox. We're all still sore about that, John. And not just Firefly. You could say that about Cough, Cough, Almost Human as well, because Almost Human was a fantastic show that starred Carl Urban, and it was probably the closest and most accurate cyberpunk show that we've seen so far, and that got the Fox axe. So I don't know. I don't wish Fox any ill will. Fox is doing what they need to do from a network standpoint. It's just that when it comes to our support for these channels, you got to go with where your heart is. And right now, I'm not the biggest American football fan, so I don't really watch Fox all that much. So it's kind of like, there's not really a huge reason for me to support Fox at all anymore, because the reason why I did it, and even the Fox show, the Fox store online, I went there, I bought Orville t-shirts, I bought Orville pins, I bought Orville mugs, merchandise. No reason for me to go there now. I don't know where that merchandise is going to be sold, but hopefully, we'll figure that out, because I do love promoting the Orville. Terry Lynn says, aren't there books/comics developing Marcus and Ivanova's relationship? I'm sure, again, Terry Jones could probably answer that. If there are, there would be fan fiction, at least for today. But there is the short story where Ivanova, well, I don't want to spoil that for you. So I'm sure, and I know that you said that you found that short story. So that's kind of like, there are so many different ways where fans kind of took their love for that relationship and created kind of their own headcanon. And unfortunately, and I don't know why this is the case, but I wish there were more really high production fan films for Babylon 5, the way that, say, Star Trek Continues did for the original series. And in some ways, even some of the other fan fiction productions, like, who is it? Well, there's Star Trek Continues that I like. Axanar, or at least the Prelude to Axanar short fan film that I like. But I really wish that there was a Babylon 5 fan film of that kind of quality to continue just short storylines. And you know what? I know that The Lost Tales was kind of headed in that direction with all these kind of short chapters and snippets into seeing where certain characters have gone. In Lost Tales, we saw kind of the relationship with John Sheridan and Ambassador not ambassador, the Emperor Ventari, the young emperor that that Sheridan kind of like wanted to help steer in the right direction. And then you had what was going on with Lockley and, you know, her storyline. And then, of course, kind of like what was going on with Galen. So you had, and all those things were small practical sets that were supported with really nice computer-generated backgrounds. And I think that was really, really well done. And I think that you can do that now, especially in this day and age with the way that fan films are produced. So if there's somebody out there that wants to do that, run a Kickstarter, and I think that would be a lot of fun to support. I think that would be a great proof of concept if you could do like a little 2-minute short of a Babylon 5 story. And I'm sure that if you wanted to, Claudia is still very active in the fan community. You know, her Snack Hack books is doing really well, and she's also in a lot of different projects, and she's still very active as a working actress. So who knows? You might be able to actually get her on there. Jason, it'll be interesting to see if you can get Jason Carter and Claudia in a fan film again. That would be amazing. Money, money, money. That seems to drive this, Terry Lynn. That is the nature of the beast, unfortunately. Daniel Keller says, have you seen or are interested in Altered Carbon? Now, that's an interesting thing that you bring up, because I was talking to a buddy of mine last night. We were looking at some video games that we have in common. We were looking at the Battletech game. As I've said before, I'm a huge World of Warcraft player. I'm excited for Classic to come out very soon at the end of August. But we are also really excited about Cyberpunk that's coming out, was it 2070? And I was looking at kind of like the proof of concept demo that came about a year ago. And he says, dude, if you like this, you would love Altered Carbon. So I haven't seen it yet. I've always loved the Cyberpunk, kind of like that tech noir future that was, you know, we obviously saw that in Blade Runner, Johnny Mnemonic. We saw that in kind of like the Cyberpunk and Shadowrun universes, Netrunner, of course, and now you're seeing it like you saw it really, really well done and well executed in Almost Human. Again, the show that was canceled on Fox, and now, yeah, I want to see Altered Carbon, because I heard that was pretty amazing, and I really do love that whole, you know, like that tech noir future where, you know, your people are kind of like, you know, they're genetically modified and they can, you know, be whatever if you have the credits, you can be whatever and however you want to be in your own universe, which I think is really, really super cool. But that goes all the way back to my love for William Gibson's work. You know, you're talking about Neuromancer and Mona Lisa Overdrive, Count Zero, you know, those types of books. So I really, really enjoy. I love that. And I'm surprised that they actually haven't done that at all. In terms of putting that either on a property, either on like an Amazon original or a Netflix original, or even on a major motion picture. I think that's like today's market is like really, really super ripe for being able to execute a proper Neuromancer, which I think would be super cool. Let's see. Doesn't WB's ownership prohibit new B5 content? It really depends on monetization. And yes, the WB may have very strict rules when it comes to the use of their license, but there are ways around it. Again, if you do it in a way that doesn't monetize the IP and you're doing it for the sake of doing it, and just doing it for fun, you're not getting any revenue from it. You're not stealing in significant ways dollars from the WB license. And I'm sure that if you even talk to WB, they'd be like, sure, that might be fine. I haven't seen anyone do it to that degree. So yeah, I think it's very well possible. Let's see. Isn't Cyberpunk from GOG? GOG? Could you explain that? What is that acronym? Terry, I'm not familiar with that. I'm probably familiar with that. I'm just thick right now because I haven't had enough coffee. John Bowersack says, Leo Laporte brought back the screensavers and he didn't use the same name, and NBC didn't go after him. Yeah, you know, it's really all about if you're making significant end roads into an IP's monetary gains, then sometimes they'll just overlook it and say like, hey, you know what? That's just kind of like free publicity when it comes to the fans and the IP, and we don't have to, you know, spend our own dollars to market it and get people like interested in supporting the IP again. Maybe more people would actually sign into Amazon Prime and support Babylon 5 in that basis. or maybe more people would subscribe to Comet. And look, our license is actually ticking up when it comes to, okay, Comet's going to renew the license with Babylon 5. We're going to get a little bit more money that way. Same thing with Amazon. So, it's like, I can understand from a Star Trek standpoint where if you're making something that doesn't have the blessing of CBS and Viacom, and you're actually driving a lot of dollars into your own account and not sharing that success with the license and the IP holder, they have every right to go to address that the way they need to address it, either with a cease and desist or legal action, because it is their IP. You're taking from their IP. But if it's something that is just a blink, when it comes to infringing on the IP and they haven't made any mention of it, I'm not advocating doing anything that is breaking that IP's legal right to any extent. However, there are ways online, and there is legal advice online for people to follow in terms of going forward with fan-based work. So if you want to do that in the Babylon 5 realm, then I strongly urge you to walk the line on the legal side and see where that's, kind of gets close to stepping too close to the neutral zone, and being in that kind of gray area of where you can and cannot support an IP versus infringing on the rights of the IP holder. I think that's a responsible thing to do, especially if you don't want to have legal action brought against you. But that's up to you. Daniel Keller says, "What character did you make in WoW? I believe you mentioned you are a Horde fan." Well, truth be told, I started my career in WoW in vanilla back in 2002, and I've played Alliance my entire life. I've played Paladins. I've played Paladins, Warriors. I played every race on the Alliance, and it's not so much that I'm a Horde fan. It's just that I've seen all of the storyline from the Alliance side up until this point, and I wanted to see what's going on from the Horde side, since we're going to be restarting the Horde lore storyline in Classic, at the end of August 23rd, I believe, which is a Tuesday. So I've never grinded the original Horde lands the way that I grinded the original Alliance lands. So I'm going to play an Orc. I'm going to play an Orc Hunter because I love the Hunter dynamic from the way that they handled it prior to Cataclysm, before they started retooling the talent point system. I like the old talent trees. So yes, Ganya was killed in the Black Star. Oh, sorry, did I say Battle of the Line? You're right, the Black Star incident where, so thanks, Terry. See, Terry keeps me on my feet. Got to make sure that the old Unagi here is sharp as attack. Unfortunately, those little details do slip through, and Terry is the, again, historian extraordinaire, or maybe historian. I think I just came up with a new word. So Randy, I'm going to play Horde. I'm going to play Orc because I really do like the Orc storyline. I like the Shaman storyline with Thrall, and I want to see the lands, and I want to grind out. Believe it or not, I do want to grind out the Barons, so I can do the newest version of the Barons chat. Barons chat 2019. I've survived the Barons chat. But hopefully it'll be more fun, and it's always more fun when you're playing with a group of friends. So let me know what server you're going to be on, and maybe we can roll some characters together. John Bowersock says, "It's a tightrope with the legal junk. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't give any advice to do so. One wrong move and it can all crumble. I would really ask what all the guidelines are." Absolutely. I'm not a lawyer either, nor do I claim to be in a position to offer any legal advice. It's just that when you follow a lot of these fan projects, that there's an old saying that it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. Just don't do it. Ask for permission first, because in this day and age, with the authorities that the IP holders have against people that are asking for permission or for forgiveness first before permission, ask for permission first. Because I've seen it happen, and I've read in forums and how these things kind of unwind, and you do not want to be on the receiving end of a CBS Viacom cease and desist / lawsuit. You just don't want to, or any property for that matter. You just don't want to, so don't do it. Make sure that if you're going to move forward with any type of fan project that borrows from an IP, that you have done your homework and you are walking the straight path, the narrow path of being on the right legal side. Be on the right legal side. Do not be on the wrong side of the law in this case. Terry Lynn says, the creators of Witcher 3 CD Projekt, I think, is making Cyberpunk, right? I believe... You know what? I'm not that familiar with who's developing that game, but I was just watching, like I said, the development video, and it's a really, really awesome looking game. Unfortunately, I have a problem with POV shooters, point of view shooters, especially first person extreme point of view shooters like this game, like Counter-Strike, like a game that I just tried out or just recently called Sea of Thieves. It's just, they just don't work for me. It's like I get motion sickness like super quickly. So it's unfortunate too, because there are a lot of great games out there that that are like a POV. So Brandy said that. So you're saying that CG Projekt is making Cyberpunk? Yeah, perfect. So yeah, when it comes to, I wanted to go back to a point I was making about my Star Trek fandom, and this weekend, usually I don't timestamp these shows because I like them to be evergreen, but it's the end of July. It's July. What day is today? Let me look at my phone. Hello, phone. So it's the end of July, and next week is the Star Trek. Well, actually, starting this week, I think it's Wednesday, is the Star Trek Las Vegas convention. I've been to it twice, and I think it's super fun. And I remember my first one I went to was 2 years ago. It was the 50th anniversary of Star Trek, and I wanted to be there. It was my best friend, and we had the best time in the world. It was an amazing experience. I met so many fantastic celebrities there, along with people that worked in the production of Star Trek. Mike and Denise Okuda. I've become friends with them because of being at the convention. I was wearing a very, very, very deep cut cosplay. I was wearing Governor Donald Corey of the episode Whom Gods Destroy. It was the episode where we met Garth of Izar, who was the greatest fleet, I believe, fleet admiral or fleet captain of the time. He was one of the greatest captains in the history of Starfleet. Anyway, so I was wearing the Governor Corey mental health uniform, and Mike and Denise Okuda, they walked by me, and he tapped me on the shoulder, and he goes, "Can I take a picture with you?" And I just kind of I had that fanboy internal squeamish moment. I'm like, oh my God, that's Mike Okuda. Oh my God, that's Denise Okuda. It was great. And they were very nice. They were very friendly. And I had a great time getting to know them, as well as Doug Drexler. And we all know Doug Drexler. He's Academy Award winner for Dick Tracy, Academy Award winner for makeup. And he is a multi-award winner for all the work that he's done across the Star Trek series when it comes to either ship design or prop design or design in general. So I was able to make friends with him there too. So it was a lot of fun. But I thought I would be in this position where I would be a little bit more kind of I don't know, like a forlorn or just depressed about not being there this year because I can't make that convention this year, and I'm not. It's okay. It's like you're not going to be able to hit every convention ever in the course of a year or in the course of several years. And I think it's just because, again, it's like I'm kind of coming to terms with that. There's a certain Star Trek energy and a certain Star Trek audience and a new generation or next generation, if you pardon the pun, that's moving forward with Star Trek. But I just don't think that that's me. I just don't think that that's me anymore, as much as I still love my Star Trek. And that's okay. There's the Star Trek that I love, and then there's the Star Trek for future audiences to love. And that's okay. That's like, it's up for me to come to terms with that realization and not the newer generation, because the newer generation, they're getting new Star Trek. They're seeing where the storylines continue. They also have a lot of the original Star Trek to delve into, to see, like, where did Picard come from? Why is he at the Picard Chateau? How did he go into retirement? What caused him to have this relationship with Data? Where did this android body of B-Force come from? All these great tidbits of nostalgic information, they're there. They're there for them to go back to and to enjoy and to see how that all pays forward into this new series, which is fantastic. Let's see here. John Bowersock says, "Oh, what do you think is going to happen with Cobra Kai season 3? Since Daniel is going to Japan, do you think Chozen is coming back?" You know your Karate Kid. You know your Karate Kid, John. You know what? That's a really good question. And for me personally, I think that the Karate Kid is probably going to, this might be the final season. I think they're only going to do 3 seasons. As successful as it is for YouTube, because yes, this is a YouTube original yet again, and the only way you can get it is another paid service to YouTube Premium. But I think that in this final incarnation of Karate Kid, I think that Daniel and Johnny are going to join forces and create a whole new dojo where they're teaching their students what they've learned over the course of learning from Mr. Miyagi, and then Johnny kind of like coming to the realization that he can teach his students the way of the Cobra, but not in the way that Kreese taught him, and trying to heal the wounds, his own personal wounds, and the personal hurt that his soul suffers from not having that father figure / teacher / sensei the way that Daniel had. So there was a time, and there were moments in season 2 where Daniel and Johnny were starting to come together, at least to understand where they were coming from a philosophical standpoint, if not just a lifestyle standpoint. Because Daniel was, there's this age-old adage of if I were in a different circumstance, I may have gone the way that you went. So if, say for instance, if Daniel didn't have Mr. Miyagi and had Kreese, like, remember, he was interested in joining Cobra Kai, what would have happened if he actually became part of that community? If he and Johnny were never enemies at the beginning, if they never had that encounter on the beach, then maybe Daniel, since he liked karate, maybe he would have gone and joined the Cobra Kai dojo. Maybe he would have been one of Johnny's friends, and maybe he would have been one of the students that suffered at the hands of Kreese later on in life. But that wasn't the case. Mr. Miyagi became his sensei. Mr. Miyagi taught him a certain way, a certain path. You know, it's very much like, what if Ben Kenobi never was discovered Luke, and Luke was discovered, by Vader and the Emperor? He would have gone a completely different path. But Johnny was essentially a good kid, and he fell into just really an environment with really poor father figures and mentors. His own stepfather was, abusive and distant, and Kreese gave him a direction to go to when it came to channeling his anger. So he learned a lot from Kreese in one way, but saw that it wasn't serving him the way that he wanted his life to go. So maybe just there's going to be kind of like a yin and yang synergy going on, John, with Daniel and with Johnny, and putting together a new Miyagi-Do Cobra Kai dojo that shares the teachings of both philosophies, so that they can find balance. Because remember, Daniel is all about balance, and Johnny is about trying to change his past in order to create a better future for not just himself, but for his students as well. So yes, I love Cobra Kai. I love the Karate Kid franchise. And it's that, for me, has brought me a lot of personal satisfaction just in terms of the way I grew up. So we have time for a few more questions. So yes, Randy, I can't wait for season 3 of Cobra Kai as well. One thing that I didn't mention about the Cobra Kai series is that in season 3, I hope that Chozen isn't part of the of that storyline, because there's no real reason for Chozen to come back, aside from the fan what do they call it, fan service of Chozen coming back. Because he was a villain, but not in a villain the same way that Johnny was the villain. Johnny was a villain because he was victimized to be the villain. I think Chozen just wasn't. He was there because they needed a villain, but it wasn't at the same level of Johnny. Because you saw at the end of Karate Kid 1 that when Kreese said sweep the leg, even Johnny was like, this isn't what I want. And Kreese just like under his thumb. He just kind of looks at Johnny and says, "You have a problem with that?" And again, mentally bullies him into doing what Kreese wants. So there was even that there was a slight glimmer of hope for Johnny at the end. And when he gave Daniel the trophy, he says, "You're all right, LaRusso." He almost kind of like there's a twinge of regret, and Johnny's like, "You know what? I wish I could have gone this way." Like look at it. Like he's won the crowd. The crowd loves him. His sensei loves him. He believes in him. And what did I get? I got second place, and then I got beaten up for it. My own mentor, my own sensei, at the end of it, he abused me, and he said that I was a loser and I was nothing. So I can't wait for season 3 of Cobra Kai. Terry, you're welcome. This was great, and it's a lot of fun. I hope to do this format a lot more in the future, and to get to know all of you a lot better. And remember, you can always get in touch with me. You can get in touch with Char. Make sure that you read all of the notes of staying in contact. We're on Instagram at ZócaloCast. We're on Facebook. Obviously, that's where our main group is. We're on here on YouTube on the ZócaloCast channel, and we're on Twitter as well. But please, if you're not friends with me on Facebook, make sure that you reach out and say hi, and we can connect there. And I am open to address and ask and answer any questions that you love about your fandoms, because I love a variety from fandoms, from science fiction to fantasy. Huge fantasy movie fan. I love westerns. I love westerns. I love World War II movies. A lot to do with history. And one thing that maybe I'm going to close on this, maybe that a lot of you that didn't know, I am a practitioner of historical European martial arts, specializing in Italian rapier and dagger, and late 17th century, early 18th century, early 19th century military saber, and sword and buckler, as well as two-handed longsword. So, and because John is here, John, that this all started off from me being a huge Highlander fan. I love Highlander, the movies, the TV shows, and I think, Terry, did you say that you just started watching Highlander, or it could have been somebody else in a previous chat? So add that to your list if you haven't seen that show yet. Finally, Terry Jones says, basically TNT weren't getting the interest among their core audience, and found as they switched off from B5 fans switched off from TNT. Their strategy was to make it as toxic as possible for Joe. So yeah, I kind of alluded to that a little bit, where TNT, they started off, I think, right with getting In the Beginning out and kind of revitalizing the franchise there, and then doing season 3 and the TNT movies, and finally Crusade. But yeah, it just didn't pan out well, unfortunately. But at least we have the Babylon 5 DVDs and the Crusade DVDs, Legend of the Rangers and the Lost Tales. At least we have all of that available to us to enjoy and share and promote Babylon 5. So thank you, everybody, for joining this live chat this morning. It was a lot of fun, and I hope that we have a chance to do this again. So again, make sure that you stay in touch. Make sure that you follow all of our social media channels. And if there's a question that I didn't get a chance to get to in this chat, please reach out. And I would love to read more of your emails here also, because getting that type of interaction from everybody here is one of the best and most rewarding reasons for talking about Babylon 5 and talking about all of our shared interests in fandom. So thanks, everybody, for joining us again. We will see you, and Char will be back next Sunday to talk a little bit more about Babylon 5, and we're going to have a very special topic for you soon. So until then, stay in touch, and thanks for joining me, and I appreciate all of the support that you give us. Be seeing you.